Charles Dean O'Banion was an American mobster who was the main rival of Johnny Torrio and Al Capone during the brutal Chicago bootlegging wars of the 1920s. In December 1919, shortly before Prohibition came into effect, O'Banion was walking down Chicago Street when he came across a parked liquor truck. O'Banion took a roll of nickels out of his pocket, approached the driver, and knocked him out. O'Banion proceeded to drive off with the liquor. He sold the whiskey in the back to saloon keepers for a total of $15,000 equivalent to $272,000 in 2024. With the onset of Prohibition in 1920, O'Banion started a bootlegging operation. He arranged for beer suppliers in Canada to start shipments immediately, and also struck deals with whiskey and gin distributors. O'Banion pioneered Chicago's first liquor hijacking on December 19, 1921. He and the lads of Kilgubin quickly eliminated all their competition. The O'Banion mob, known as the North Side Gang, now ruled the North Side and the Gold Coast, the wealthy area of Chicago situated on the northern lakefront of Lake Michigan. As O'Banion's name grew in the underworld, he attracted more followers, including Samuel Nails Morton, Louis Two Gun Altieri, and Handsome Dan McCarthy. At the height of his power, O'Banion was supposedly making about $40 million in 3 years from liquor. During one famous caper, O'Banion and his men stole over $100,000 worth of Canadian whiskey from the West Side Railroad yards in another famous robbery. O'Banion looted the padlocked Sibley distillery and walked off with 1,750 barrels of bonded whiskey. In 1920, Johnny Torrio, the head of the predominantly Italian South Side mob, and his lieutenant, Al Capone, met with all the Chicago bootleggers to work out a system of territories. It was beneficial to everyone to avoid bloody turf battles. In addition, the gangsters were able to pool their political power and their soldiers in the streets. O'Banion accepted the agreement and was given control of the North Side, including the desirable Gold Coast. The North Siders now became part of a huge Chicago area bootlegging combine. O'Banion lived with Torrio's deal for about 3 years before becoming dissatisfied with it. Since a recent election in neighboring Cicero, Illinois, the city had become a gold mine for the Southsiders and O'Banion wanted a cut of it. To placate him, Torrio granted O'Banion some of Cicero's beer rights and a quarter interest in a casino called the Ship. The enterprising O'Banion then convinced a number of speakeasies in other Chicago territories to move to his strip in Cicero. This move had the potential to start a bootleg war. Torrio attempted to convince O'Banion to abandon his plan in exchange for some South Side brothel proceeds. O'Banion angrily refused, as he abhorred prostitution. Meanwhile, the Jenna brothers, who controlled Little Italy west of the Loop, began marketing their whiskey in the North Side, O'Banion's territory. O'Banion complained about the Jennas to Torrio, but Torrio did nothing. Not one to back down, O'Banion started hijacking Jenna liquor shipments. The Jennas sought to murder O'Banion, but Mike Merlo, the president of the Union Siciliana, had business with O'Banion and prevented the Jennas from resorting to violence against the North Siders. O'Banion continued on the offensive. In February 1924, he moved against his South Side rivals by unsuccessfully trying to frame Torrio and Capone for the murder of North Side hanger-on John Duffy, a gun for hire from Philadelphia. Duffy, following a violent drunken argument, had smothered his bride Maybelle Exley with a pillow while she slept. When he awoke the following morning, he panicked and called a friend, asking for a car and money to get out of town. He was soon contacted by O'Banion, who agreed to help him. He told Duffy to meet him at the Four Deuces, a South Wabash club run by the Torrio Capone organization. At the club, several eyewitnesses reported seeing Duffy being picked up around 8 p.m. in a Studebaker by O'Banion and an unidentified man. Duffy's body was later found in a snowbank outside Chicago. He had been shot 3 times in the head with a .38 caliber pistol. Another witness later told police that he saw O'Banion and 2 other men dump Duffy's body, but he later retracted his statement. As Duffy had been last seen at the Four Deuces, suspicion logically focused on club manager Al Capone. The subsequent investigation brought unwanted attention from law enforcement on the club, as it was a source of illegal gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging. When police started to view O'Banion as a possible suspect, the gang leader told reporters, "The police don't have to look for me. I'll go and look for them. I'll be at the state's attorney's office at 2:30 p.m. Monday afternoon. I can tell the state's attorney anything he wants to know about me." Whatever happened to Duffy is out of my line. I don't mix with that kind of riffraff. Police officials were never able to gather enough evidence to charge O'Banion with Duffy's murder. They theorized that O'Banion and two accomplices drove Duffy to a remote woodland area. Stopping on Nottingham Road, Duffy and O'Banion got out of the car to relieve themselves. At that point, O'Banion stood behind the unsuspecting Duffy and shot him in the back of the head. O'Banion then shot Duffy twice more before dumping his body in the snowbank. Police think that O'Banion killed Duffy because he wanted to avoid a highly publicized investigation into the murder of Duffy's wife. By meeting Duffy at a Chicago outfit club and taking Duffy for a one-way ride, he hoped to shift blame for Duffy's murder onto Torrio and Capone. The last straw for Torrio was O'Banion's treachery in the Zebin Brewery raid. Both O'Banion and Torrio held large stakes in the Zebin Brewery in Chicago. In May 1924, O'Banion learned that the police were planning to raid the brewery on a particular night. Before the raid, O'Banion approached Torrio and told him he wanted to sell his share in the brewery, claiming that the Guinness scared him and he wanted to leave the rackets. Torrio agreed to buy O'Banion's share and gave him $500,000. On the night of O'Banion's last shipment, the police swept into the brewery. O'Banion, Torrio, and numerous South Side gangsters were arrested. O'Banion got off easily because, unlike Torrio, he had no previous Prohibition-related arrests. Torrio had to bail out himself and 6 associates, plus face later court charges with the possibility of jail time. O'Banion also refused to return the money Torrio had given him in the deal. Torrio soon realized he had been double-crossed. He had lost the brewery and $500,000 in cash. $9 million in 2024, had been indicted and had been humiliated. Nevertheless, Torrio was willing to overlook this insult in order to maintain peace in the Chicago underworld until O'Banion himself made the situation irretrievable later that year. During the summer of 1924, O'Banion and his wife Viola took a long vacation at the Colorado Dude Ranch of his henchman Louis Aldieri. On his way back to Chicago, O'Banion purchased a large supply of weapons in Denver, including 3 Thompson submachine guns, or baby machine guns, as they were referred to in a local newspaper. O'Banion was murdered soon after his return to Chicago, before he had a chance to use his new Thompsons on any of his enemies. On the morning of November 10, 1924, O'Banion was clipping chrysanthemums in Schofield's back room. Yale entered the shop with Jenna gunmen John Scalise and Albert Anselmi. When O'Banion and Yale shook hands, Yale grasped O'Banion's hand in a tight grip. At the same time, Scalise and Anselmi stepped aside and fired 2 bullets into O'Banion's chest and 2 into his throat. One of the killers fired a final shot into the back of his head as he lay face down on the floor. The O'Banion killing sparked a brutal 5-year gang war between the North Side Gang and the Chicago outfit that culminated in the killing of 7 North Side Gang members in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929.